Well, I read so much rage and indignation in your work, Mark Ames. But how do you translate that into political action? Because I get the impression that very few people are discussing asking these basic questions about whether or not we are still a democracy and whether we have become a plutocracy or a timocracy, as the Greeks said, the rule of money.
Well, I'll tell you, I think if there's one lesson that people on the left don't really like talking about, there's a lesson from, the 30s, and there's a lesson even from today with the teabaggers. It's that when you actually scare a powerful class, and they can always be scared, depending on how far you're willing to go. When you scare them, behavior changes. When you don't scare them, the behavior doesn't change. I was on this bus, on this kind of notorious, infamous bus tour of the AIG executives who were taking these multi-million-dollar bonuses. This was back in March. If you remember, that was when sort of the class war rage was, at least in the official media, that's when it was raging kind of the hottest. And when word came out that these AIG executives had budgeted themselves these multi-million bonuses, their addresses were outed in Connecticut, and then a bus tour of their homes was arranged. And the reports that came out in the next couple of days, guys all offered to return their bonuses. They were literally praying to reporters. So scaring them worked. Ultimately, that fizzled out. These guys, as can be expected, reneged on their promises. They didn't return all their bonus money. Everybody got kind of scared by this class war talk. But I think the same thing happened from what I read in the 30s. I mean, there were some really violent confrontations in the 1930s that eventually led to kind of a power shift away from the plutocrat. It wasn't just because the economy collapsed. There were actually a lot of violent confrontations and the threat and fear of violence. As far as I can tell, that's the only thing that really can change things. I'm not saying people need to go out and do something violent, but they can certainly. If you get in a bus and you drive around the homes of these people who are making billions off of our suffering, it makes them uncomfortable, and it scares them. They know what they're doing deep down, and it might modify behavior if we did that a little more regularly.
Well, it is ironic that the teabaggers and the Birches and the Berthas and these kind of right-wing groups are the ones that seem to be engaged in a populist outrage. They've got it all wrong because they support the policies of the politicians who got us into the place in the first place. But it would seem to me that there's a whole bunch of politicians out there that are nominally supposed to be representing people, not capital. I mean, I don't expect the Republican Party to change their ways. They're a wholly owned subsidiary of corporate America, but the Democratic Party is maybe a 60 or 70% owned subsidiary of corporate America. And wouldn't it make sense for citizens to light a fire under their representatives on the Democratic side and get them to represent them and not capital?
I mean, if you believe, you probably got to scare the Democrats in some way, but I don't know. There's such a bankrupt party, and Obama.
Compared to what, though? I mean, I'm saying you've only got one party you can work with. The other side, the Republicans, are totally in the bag. So.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's the horrible choice in this country, like it or not. And unfortunately, it's kind of like Russia, where we have to hope for a good czar. I mean, people were kind of hoping, without really knowing what Obama was about, that he was going to be the good czar. And after Bush, it was such a disaster. And what has Obama done? He picked all the wrong people on the let's leave aside the foreign policy side, but certainly on the finance side, by putting Larry Summers and Tim Geithner in charge. It's like putting the thieves in charge of their own investigation.
Yeah, but you don't have to. None of this stuff requires any radical solutions or any demonstrations or violence. It just requires the politicians to start taking care of their constituents. And I would.
No, but the politicians are scared. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but the politicians are scared of people with money because they've got to be scary people, and they're not scared of us because they know we don't have a choice.
Yeah, but
So I think people at the top react to fear. In fact, I think fear is a really vastly underrated incentivizer. You know, we think that positive incentives do all these wonderful things, and that was this whole kind of market theory of the last 30 years, and I think it's been kind of proven wrong. People react to fear of losing jobs, fear of losing property, fear of getting locked up, whatever. And there's no fear. There's no fear in any, there's no fear coming from the people to the Democrat Party politicians. There's no fear among the ruling class, the billionaires, that, if they rip off another, couple of $1 trillion from us, that something's going to happen. What happened? They must be laughing.
I understand,
well,
but
I think we actually need to think of ways to instill fear in them.
Well, I was just going to raise as an example or a model a very radical American politician, Dwight David Eisenhower, who was a Republican president, and under his reign, the rich paid 90% income tax. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to be Einstein to figure that out. That if these people started paying their fair share of taxes, we'd go a long way to restoring the American middle class and restoring some fairness in this country. At any rate, Mark, I thank you so much for joining us and for your work, and keep making us angry. Maybe one of these days we'll